Your boy got a haircut. It happened. Let's get over it. The first motorcycle I ever bought in my motorcycling career, I guess you can call it, was a 2008 Yamaha FC6 that I bought for $2,300. This is all the way back in 2019. I was 18 years old when I bought my first motorcycle. My parents were not happy about it. I was originally a car kid when I was in high school, and I got into motorcycles because cars are expensive. I could not afford a cool car at 18 years old working a job at Target. So I became fascinated with the Yamaha R6. Lo and behold, it also turns out you can't afford a Yamaha R6 while working a job at Target in high school. So I got the next best thing. The Yamaha FC6 is basically a detuned R6 motor in a sport touring frame. It has the heart of a Yamaha R6, but it's shaped like an old man bike. And I loved that motorcycle actually a lot. Red line of 14,000. It's gonna scream like an F1 car. It revved to 14,000 RPM. I loved it. I took care of it the best I could. Even though that bike had 26,000 miles when I got it, I ended up putting over 30,000 miles on that bike by the end of the season. And by the end of that motorcycle season, I also sold that bike for a pretty good profit. I think I made close to $1,000 on that bike between all of the miles that I put on it, the gas that I put in it. Wasn't a bad deal. I sold the bike thinking I would make my parents happy, you know, we had a nice little motorcycle phase, but that was going to be it. Well, I couldn't stay away. After enjoying that bike through COVID, I went the winter without a motorcycle thinking I wasn't gonna have one for the next season. But I ended up stacking a little bit of money, and so I had a little bit more money going into next spring. I missed my motorcycle so much, I ended up buying another one. Going into the 2021 season, I found a 2014 Yamaha FZ09. This is back before they were calling these bikes MT09s, but it's basically the same motor that I had in the R9 and on the page just a little bit ago, but it was a naked bike. It was a naked bike without any traction control, ABS, wheelie control, any of that stuff. A bike with 110 horsepower with a kid that barely had a season prior. Very, very stupid idea, as you're gonna come to find out, as it was the first motorcycle I ever crashed. So literally, like, not even the fucking levers are bent. My brake pedal's fine. Literally nothing got damaged except this got a little dirty. I mean,
and
like,
your confidence.
And my confidence, yeah. So I didn't see this little ditch here, right into there. So we're fine though. Like, everything literally works, except I haven't started it up yet, but like, it's not throwing any error codes, so that's like a good sign. Going into the 2021 season, I was absolutely terrified of this bike. It was an 849cc. At the time, I thought it was basically a liter bike. Come to find out, it was just a little middleweight that I couldn't handle. And one night while I was out riding the twisties for some reason at night, I came up on a corner too fast and went off into a ditch. I got launched off the bike, hit the ditch at about 50 miles an hour, and I got very lucky. I had no motorcycle gear on, and I hit a patch of soft grass after it just rained, and so I was just covered in a little bit of mud. I picked the bike back up, rode home, and cleaned it the next day, hoping that my parents wouldn't wonder why my bike was covered in mud. Alas, if I wasn't already terrified of that bike before that accident, I was much more terrified of it after. Despite being broke, I was so terrified of this FZ09, I ended up buying a Honda Grom to try to teach myself how to ride properly so I could better control the FZ09. This ended up not really working out too well, and so eventually I came to terms with myself and I sold the FZ09. I ended up making, again, a pretty good profit on this bike. I think I sold it for $1,500 profit, which is pretty good considering I pretty much lose money on every motorcycle I buy these days. But now all I had was the Honda Grom, and I don't think I was terribly happy with that. You see, all of my friends that I made while riding motorcycles, they all had big bikes that I struggled to keep up with on the Grom. And a lot of them expressed annoyance to me when we were out riding that I couldn't keep up with them. The fact that we couldn't take highways, we couldn't go long distances, all because I was on a little Honda Grom. So after much internal debate, I ended up buying my friend's 2019 Yamaha R3. And I got bored of that bike very quickly. I unfortunately don't have many stories to tell with the Yamaha R3 because I sold it within a month of ownership. And as I look at my non-existent watch, my guy, would you look at the time? I have a lot to do today and a lot of stories to tell. Between 18 different motorcycles, there's a lot to do here. And I also have to prepare for my California trip, so I'm taking you guys with me on this. I ended up selling the R3 to a friend of mine. At the time, we decided on a payment plan where he gave me half up front and then would make payments over time. Bad idea. Don't ever do that. I never ended up getting the full amount for that R3. So immediately after that, I took the Grom and I traded it in for my white ZX6R. This was a little bit of a dream bike for me at the time. I had completely fallen in love with my friend's Yamaha R6, but unfortunately they quit production of those back in 2021. So I went venturing and found myself a white ZX6R, which is like the little brother or like a cousin to the R6. It's made by Kawasaki, yes, but it's a very similar style of bike. Revs to 15.5, not as high as the R6, but still cool. And I absolutely fell in love with that machine. Oh? Oh, why are we here? Ducati Corporate finally did something. They listened to me for once. My God, am I excited to show you guys this today. No. So here's the V4 as she sits. As we last left her, the tires on this thing were kind of chopped. I rode this bike for a full season. I don't even know how many miles I put on it. 4,263 miles. Never replaced the stock tires, and I probably should have a while ago, but that's why we are here, is because I plan on taking this bike with me all the way to California, and I'm just trying to get this thing fully serviced up before we go. But also, there's one more bonus reason why I brought this bike into the dealership. Usually, tires is something I probably could tackle by myself, but I figured I'd bring it here because also the V4 is getting cruise control today. Kind of whack that Ducati shipped these bikes not only without cruise control, but also they made it originally. Hi, Kyle. Originally, they made it so if you got the exhaust on this bike, you pay the $5,000, get the full exhaust. It's great. It sounds lovely, but then you can't get cruise control on the bike for whatever reason. Finally, Ducati, it seems like they changed that, right? I'm not, okay, good, okay. Ducati changed it so now you can have cruise control, electronic cruise control with the exhaust. There was literally nothing holding them back from doing this other than electronically controlling that, so thank God. Finally, whatever Ducati executive finally had a moment of reason, they changed that. And now I'm getting cruise control, put on this bike so I can have a bike with cruise control out in California. Sorry, it's a lot. I ended up owning the 2021 Kawasaki ZX6R for a grand total of a little over a year. And this was the motorcycle I really started to fall in love with the sport. I don't know what it is about inline four screamers, but for whatever reason, they just speak to me. I loved riding that motorcycle more so than a lot of other bikes that I owned. However, not long into my ownership, I ended up buying a 2016 Triumph Daytona 675. That ended up being a motorcycle I loved dearly. It was just set up so much better in the 636 with a better suspension, better chassis. I just enjoyed riding that bike around. It had a little bit more character than the 636. It sounded a little bit more unique in my opinion. And I often bring that up as a big reason why I bought my Triumph 765 that I just recently picked up. I owned both of those motorcycles for a little bit, the Triumph and the Kawasaki. But after riding the Triumph around for a little bit, I very quickly realized that the Triumph is just a better version. It was a better 600 compared to the 636. And so I ended up selling the 636 for quite a considerable loss. And this is really when I started losing a lot of money on motorcycles. I don't know why Ducati makes these fairings so difficult to remove. At least it's better than an S1K. I keep telling myself that. Christ. Oh my God, I did it. Would you look at that bluing titanium over the 4,000 miles I put on this bike. It's so gorgeous. It's a shame that it's kind of hidden behind all the complex fairings that Ducati puts on these bikes. Without you, I remember myself, my name. I unfortunately don't think there's a way that I'm going to be able to drain this oil without getting oil all over the pipe. We might just have to go for it here. It's going to hurt my soul deeply. Ow. Yeah, she got a little bit of oil on the pipe. It's fine. Rust prevention on titanium. You know, it never hurt nobody. It doesn't really do anything. It's fine. So the year 2022 going into 2023, I had just sold my white 2021 ZX6R. The only bike that I had going into that winter was the Triumph Daytona 675. Unfortunately, this was another bike that didn't last that long. Come springtime 2023, I ended up purchasing my first Ducati ever, which was a 2021 Ducati Panigale V2. I found a really good deal on this bike. It was actually the first bike that I bought from Ducati Cleveland back at their old location. This was a dream bike that I had for a while. I remember growing up thinking that the V2 was like, that's the perfect sport bike. It was 150 horsepower, had a little bit of that Ducati flavor. It wasn't quite a liter bike, so I didn't think it would scare me that much. I ended up purchasing the bike and I actually loved it a lot. I think that my riding style has changed a lot that I don't think that generation of V2 necessarily would support. Every time I've ridden it in modern days, they don't seem to be great, or like they can wheelie for sure. They're just not very agreeable with it. And so that's why I kind of just, it's not the bike that I prefer now, but back then I loved it. This was the point in my period of my life where I was so broke, I was about to have to start selling motorcycles for good. I think there was literally a point where I had like $500 in my bank account and it was slowly dwindling. I sold the 675 to continue funding my motorcycle passion, and it was starting to look like it just wasn't going to work out. Especially as my only bike, a Ducati V2 Super Quattro motor out of warranty was probably not the best decision of all time. And so time was ticking until eventually I would have to sell every bike and have to move on with my life. Luckily, that's not what had to happen. In the meantime, we finally have cruise control on the Panigale V4. There she is, boys. One of the first Panigale V4s in the country with an exhaust and cruise control installed. And I'm also getting tire pressure sensor monitors on there as well. So that way, when I'm out in Cali, if I get a nail in my tire or something, I can figure that out sooner rather than later. I also kind of low-key want to turn that off. I don't want to have a plate light when I'm out in Cali.
I hope your bike gets towed.
I hope your bike explodes and you have nothing to ride next season and have to beg me to ride mine.
It probably will explode. Try to start it real quick. Push the start button.
Kaden, go hit that button like a good little boy.
Shouldn't start.
Good boy. And just like that, boys, we got the V4 all ready for California. New tires on the front, new tires in the back, tire pressure sensor monitor, so that way when I'm out in Cali, I don't have to guess about my tire pressure. And finally, cruise control on a 205 horsepower superbike. I just want to say a huge shout out to Ducati Cleveland for letting me use your workshop here. Also appreciate the installation on the tires as well. That was super cool of them. I always try to shout these guys out whenever I come here because they do really good service for me, and whenever someone does good service for me, I always make sure that that's taken care of. They keep me running, and so maybe they'll keep you running as well. They also have a really cool selection of bikes here, so maybe check them out for me, mention me, maybe mention that I brought you here. So yeah, anyway, let's go. And just like that, boys, we have the V4 sketchily loaded up in there. She's teetering quite a bit to the side, but I guess it's fine. I don't know, I guess if she drops on the side, then we're not taking the V4 to Cali. Well, we made our way home, and we found the bike is literally, look how far this thing is teetering without me slipping on the ice. Look how far this thing is teetering, first of all. My God. It's because this strap came undone, and thank God for canyon dancers, because that's the only thing that kept it from coming apart. And guess who was the one who strapped it down, by the way?
Guess who put the ramp in? You put the ramp in.
All right, let's get this sucker down. Well, the V4 is officially safe and sound in the garage. Getting her all prepped for Cali took me a little bit longer than I originally anticipated, and unfortunately, I still have a lot of stories to tell. So there I was with a Ducati Panigale V2 in my garage and dwindling funds to support it. And I had about 2 more years left of school when suddenly, TikTok saved me. I finally had an income stream from the videos I was putting out into the world. And to a college kid with literally no other funds, no rent because I was still living at my parents' house, no utilities, the small amount of money that I was pulling in from TikTok made a massive difference. And it was good timing too, because that was right when my Ducati Panigale V2 started leaking oil. Yeah, my first Ducati experience was not fantastic. And I ended up trading that bike in while it was still actively leaking oil for a Triumph Speed Triple RR. The V2 was actually actively leaking oil, and so before I pulled up to the dealership to trade the bike in, I pulled off on the side of the road and wiped up the oil that was leaking before I presented the bike to the dealership to trade in. That way guaranteeing myself a higher trade-in value because they would not take a bike that was leaking oil. So with the social media money that I earned from TikTok, I bought myself a Triumph Speed Triple RR. This was my first example of a bike with leader bike performance, you could say. These days, I think it's considered a little bit of a sub-leader bike. Like bikes like the V4, like that make like 200 plus horsepower. These are kind of in a different class. But back then, to me, someone who probably should not even be on a bike with 150 horsepower, let alone 180 horsepower, that was a lot of bike. This is where we start to get into the realm of bikes that I did not have anywhere near the skill to possess to own these motorcycles, but I still own them nonetheless and rode them like a complete boring grandmother. That's why I tell kids with only 2 years of motorcycle experience, don't bother with a powerful motorcycle. You don't need it. You really don't. I mean, you're probably gonna go out and buy it anyway, but like, whatever. Now, the Speed Triple RR was an interesting bike. This is actually when I really started gaining some traction on social media. You know, this is where I have the videos of my ex, and I started to have some real biker interactions because I rode the crap out of that bike. You know, when you ride a motorcycle, you tend to have more interactions. It's just kind of what happens. So eventually I found myself a wicked deal on a 2018 Yamaha R1. Now this is where I start to build a little bit of a motorcycle collection. The R1 is a fantastic bike that I still miss to this day. Those are 2 really awesome bikes that I kind of miss. That being the Speed Triple RR and the R1. That was a fantastic lineup. Both of those bikes were super easy to work on. I loved owning those bikes at the same time. The Speed Triple was super comfortable with the passenger, really easy to work on, and the R1 was just, it was such a blissful motorcycle to ride. It was so comfortable too. I low-key miss that thing. But after owning the R1 for a little bit, I finally managed to test drive a BMW S1000 RR. Now this was another dream bike of mine. I loved the BMWs. I loved the way they rode, and I liked the way, like the prestige behind owning a BMW at the time. I was like that brain-rotted TikTok kid, you know, like, you know the type, the squid. You know, the kid that doesn't know anything about motorcycle riding and thinks that a BMW is the coolest thing ever. Yeah, that was me. And after I had a really interesting pullover interaction that blew up on TikTok, I got paid pretty well from that. And I took that paycheck and immediately turned around and bought a BMW. Now that's an interesting bike that's gonna have to wait till the 2024 season to talk about. I ended up having a bunch of problems with that bike, and we'll talk about that. But right before the winter hit for 2023, I ended up test driving a Ducati Panigale V4S, and that completely blew my socks off. Again, being that TikTok brain-rotted kid that really didn't know how to ride a motorcycle. Going from an R1, S1K, and Speed Triple to riding a Panigale V4, it felt like a combination of all those bikes thrown into one, and then felt like it was on crack. That was probably it felt like riding a roller coaster. It was one of the wildest experiences of my life, was test driving a Panigale V4 for the first time. Really wish I had it on video, because that was wild. I was screaming the whole time. So the winter of 2023 going into 2024, I decided to buy a Ducati Panigale V4. Now, my motorcycle collection was starting to get out of hand at the time, was my perception. And so I decided to sell my Yamaha R1 so I could then buy the Panigale V4. That was a mistake that I will come to find. Oh, and then I also sold the Speed Triple as well. I forgot to mention that. I sold the Speed Triple and the R1 so I could afford the Panigale V4. Cool. Fast forward to the spring of 2024. I started to ride the Panigale V4 and I started to ride the S1K, and I started to realize, wow, I really don't know how to ride. Maybe I should try a lesser horsepower motorcycle. That is when I bought my first Ducati Hyper 698. Now, me at the time being a dumb brain-rotted TikTok kid, I didn't understand that motorcycle at all. And I ended up selling it within 1,000 miles. I'm not even joking. One of the dumber decisions of my life, just because I didn't understand a motorcycle doesn't mean it's not worth it. I clearly had no idea what I was doing on motorcycles, and I should have realized it maybe a little bit sooner. But again, this comes with time, it comes with mistakes. It's just part of riding. Everybody goes through it. At least I would hope so. Everybody goes through this, hopefully. But not long after selling the 698 and just having the V4 and the S1K for a little bit, I ended up buying a Yamaha MT-07. This ended up being the perfect bike for me, and ended up being the bike I think I rode the most back in 2024. Really, honestly, a bike I probably should have stayed on a little bit longer, but I was learning a lot more when I was riding my MT-07 than when I was riding the V4s and the S1Ks of that world. And I really wish I had bought a smaller CC motorcycle like that sooner, because I think up until then, that was the lowest horsepower motorcycle besides the R3 and the Grom, I guess. I just really wish I kept that motorcycle longer. Not long after buying the MT-07 though, I ended up buying a Kawasaki H2 that I still have sitting in my garage. This was a bike I don't think is like a bike anybody reasonable can ever control. So it's kind of different than my philosophy with the S1K and the V4. It's just a fun bike that you can wail on and go really fast in a straight line. It's not really meant to do corners anyway. You're not meant to do wheelies on it. It's just a weird singular purpose motorcycle. So I don't really regret buying that bike. This was a bike that was always kind of meant to happen. And I actually purchased that motorcycle while I was in California on a little trip with my friend at the time. I kind of made the decision. I was like, in my head, I was like, I really wanted to move to California just because of the nice weather, which low-key can be the move. But my reason with staying in Ohio is I would get to finish school, which I finished literally this week, so it's kind of coming full circle here. My family is here and my friends are here. And so the majority of my friends are here. So I ended up making the decision to stay in Ohio, spend the money, buy my H2, buy everyone's weird dream bike, and that was gonna be my decision. Now, 2024 is when I started to gain a conscience. Riding the MT-07, I finally learned how to do little wheelies, little pow-pows. And it was the S1K where I was starting to master that. However, the S1K is not a bike you really want to master wheelies on because you're doing them at 100 miles an hour. To be quite frank with you, it was stupid. And I realized it very quickly. I'm like, I'm hanging off this bike at 100 miles an hour on a wheelie. I'm gonna die. And so I made the executive decision to buy another Ducati Hypermotard 698, which I, again, still own to this day. I'm proud of that decision because it shows a semblance of maturity during a time in my life where I don't think I had a lot of that. I realized that doing wheelies at 100 miles an hour wasn't going to be sustainable, and so I ended up, buying a bike that was more capable of doing that stuff at a lower speed. Not long after that, I crashed my Ducati Panigale V4, my first one. So yeah, that really tells you like the little storyline there of, the humbling matters. It's not a matter of if you were crash, it's a matter of when. And unfortunately, I wasn't wearing any motorcycle gear at the time. It affected me really heavily, and low-key still affects me to this day, and so it's not fun to think back on and reflect, but it's important to think about it nonetheless. Not long after that, I sold my BMW S1000 RR because I knew the trouble that 1000cc bike would get me into. Unfortunately, not long after that, I ended up buying another Ducati Panigale V4, which is probably one of the dumber decisions in my life, but I'm stuck with it now. Hard to resist it. I mean, come on, she's so cute. I probably shouldn't have bought this bike. To be quite frank with you, I probably shouldn't have done it. It's just the new one, I'm not even gonna try to justify it. I can't even justify it. It's a dumb decision. I think it's stupid. I think it's really dumb, and I did it, but now I'm stuck with it, and so now I'm really happy. So I guess don't do as I say, not as I do. The next bike I ended up buying was one of the coolest motorcycles I have ever bought in my life. That is my 2025 race model Yamaha R6. This was a cool motorcycle. I was so insanely hyped to get on this bike. I mean, I've told the story many times. Like, I had a friend in high school, as I mentioned earlier, who had a Yamaha R6. I love 600s, I love the screamers, and the R6 is the ultimate screamer. It reminds me of my first bike, it reminds me of my early days of riding because of that friend who had an R6, and to be able to buy a brand new bike, no one else is butt has sat and farted on that seat except for mine. To have a brand new bike go from 0 miles all the way up to, I think I'm sitting at almost 5,000 miles on that bike now, it makes me happy. And that's like a bike that was like so special. It's more special in the H2, more special than any of the bikes that I own. That is a cool bike to me. Next bike I ended up buying was the 2025 R9 that I just recently sold. This was a bike I was excited for because, again, it reminds me of a bike I owned in my early days, the FZ09, but I ended up being a little bit disappointed by it. Back in 2021, when I owned that 2014 FZ09, that was a bike that scared me. You know, 110 horsepower, there's a lot to handle. I've come a long way over the past 5-6 years, and now 110 horsepower doesn't really scare me all that much anymore. It's just kind of there, and it was fun for a time, but it wasn't what I was fully expecting. I was expecting something a little bit more wild, and I explained the full reasons of why I sold that bike in the video of why I sold it. If you want to check that out, it was the last video I posted, so like go check that out. After buying the R9, I bought another Honda Grom. Again, this is a bike I probably should have kept for the long term, but obviously I didn't have money back then, so I had to sell it back then to afford the bikes I had. You get my point. I bought another Honda Grom now that I'm a little bit better off with my finances, and that's a bike that I should be learning how to really wheelie on that bike, hopefully next summer. I was trying to learn this year, but I got cut off by school. I can't really afford an injury while I'm in school, hoping that you guys would be understanding on that one, and for the most part you guys were, so that was cool. I want to improve my motorcycle riding ability. I just couldn't have school interrupted by another bad accident. I know it's hard to mess yourself up on a Grom, it's just still possible, and so I couldn't allow that to happen. And the last bike that I have on my list of motorcycles that I've purchased is my Triumph Daytona 765. This is a bike that I still have to get well acquainted with. I just got it tuned while I was down in Florida for a little trip, if you guys want to check out that video. But I think I'm also going to be taking this bike to California with me as well, so she's going to be coming with me on a few adventures. With all that being said, I'm sorry, this was a mouthful, and I'm glad if you guys stuck around for the full video. Wish I could be riding while talking about all this, but obviously it's below freezing here, so hopefully you guys understand, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Hope you enjoyed. Bye-bye.